How's it going, everybody? So I wanted to synthesize three concepts that relate to another video that I did on unpaid internships. In some, I did a video about unpaid internships and what happens economically if they are banned or outlawed and things like that. And that is that they eventually disappear because if the minimum wage is a certain amount and they can't afford to take on internships, well, then companies just make those positions disappear and they only do real hires. That's just pure economics of what happens in reality. Now, I want to bring in a couple things because someone posted a video response or link response to that video. Apparently, there's some people in the UK who are upset that they're working all these hours and not getting paid, and they're trying to say, "Oh, and unpaid internships." And again, I can talk about the simple economics of it, of what happens when you force payment and those things disappearing. But I want to bring in other reasons as to why this is such a bigger picture, and people just, for lack of imagination or lack of mathematical understanding, don't get what happens if you don't take the entire picture together. The short of it is that it is a combination, this unpaid internship situation is a combination of about three different major playing factors. One is that the educational system as it is, that is the government-approved state schools, colleges, universities, the different types of accrediting agencies, what they've promoted and prompted for a lot of different universities and schools across the globe. There's many different types of accrediting agencies, but the general motif is that they've promoted schools which don't give any practical experience. Pure and simple. I've been to two of some of the largest colleges in the United States, and the practical experience is very rare, unless you're at the top program. Unfortunately, I got some good practical experience, but even then, many people are coming out of school, and they are having all this theory and all this, like, oh, someone did research, and I'm studying my professor's research, stuff like that. They have no real-world experience, okay? People are paying for this. You're paying to not have experience. Think about that. The people who are out there getting their degrees are paying money to be taught stuff. And the issue here is that in the past, people would often do apprenticeships. When they did apprenticeships, they'd make a small amount of money, but they'd be learning as they go. And the problem with the education system as it is that people are paying exorbitant amounts of money to come out and not know anything. I mean, it's just, it's stupid. People don't see that connection. Oh, wait, I'm paying all this money to learn, but I have no agency experience, I have no business experience, I have no nothing. Like, you come out and you're like, oh, I have a degree, great. Well, what do you know about working, in this business field? Nada, not a lot of. People try to do the internships, they try to do those things before they graduate, but very often people don't have that experience, or at least the long-term experience people want. And that is, one of the pillar problems is that because of how the accreditation works, in the United States, there isn't an official body that accredits schools. They have a list. They have a list of like their recommendations, but the mechanisms of systems that have been created and prompted through a lot of NGO development in the early 20th century has led to a bunch of people so we're spending $40, $50, $60, sometimes $100,000 to go to a four-year university and have no real-world experience. It's insane. And then you say, oh, well, what about my unpaid internship? Oh, no. Meanwhile, you just paid $50,000 to spend 4 years in a school and have no real-world experience, right? Look at that comparison. You just paid a bunch of money to somebody to teach you something. Meanwhile, oh, if you don't get paid anything, you come out with like a net. Oh, instead of paying money, that's bad. Okay. People just need to let that sit for a second and think about what that means. Paying $20,000 to learn versus getting an unpaid internship where you're not paying money to learn. Just think about that. Now, beyond that, there's the other economics. There's the business economic side, right? We have to look at regulation as far as what government regulates that makes business operation expense higher. The higher business operating expenses are, the more expensive it is to bring on new talent or to offer money. And the thing is that when you have that compounded, with one regulation called minimum wage, you kill out a whole bunch of opportunities. Imagine, for example, would it be better if you had, on one hand, an unpaid internship, or what if they were to say, well, we can afford to do $5 an hour? I mean, pretty obvious. $5 an hour versus not getting paid? It's pretty great. Now compare that to a university educational setting. They're making you pay, in some cases, $100, $200, $300, $400 a credit hour, right? Paying that money to learn, as opposed to getting paid $5 an hour to learn. And that's the problem. The problem is that people are not making these connections between learning, education, real-world experience, and what it is they're putting in. The reason why the 4-year degree thing is like, oh, good, is because parents are paying money, right? They're paying money for their kids so they can go and sit and learn for 4 years and come out. People are getting into debt, right? They're taking money out so that they can go to school, and they're going to have to pay interest on that. Well, how is that different than possibly going into debt to take an unpaid internship? Right? How is that, any different than, oh, well, I'm actually at least getting paid $3 an hour, $5 an hour to do this internship. Yeah, it doesn't cover all my expenses, but if I saved up money or if I got a loan, now I'm learning, but it's not as high of an expense. Again, these are all things that are not taken into account when people have this emotional gut reaction to, oh, there's unpaid internships and, we can't afford to do anything. I'm just going serial internship to internship. People do not have the intellectual wherewithal to be able to calculate this many levels out as to total economic factors. And that's really the fallacy that a lot of people suffer. And I hate to put it this bluntly, but they are either, in their personality type, they do not have the natural capacity for calculating ripple effects, or they can't do the math. Really, it's pure and simple, you know what I mean? They can't even pull out a freaking TI-83 and do the numbers. That's just it. It's nothing crazy, it's nothing mysterious. Businesses, when they're in competition with each other, begin the one-upping level. That's just it. They want the best talent. Well, guess what? The company that's saying, we're going to, give you an internship, but it's not paid, versus the company that says, well, we can afford to pay you $3 an hour. Guess what? The people that are like, oh yeah, $3 an hour, that's better than nothing, are going to go there. And that's the stratification of education and getting money. And this was, this was the way it was for many years across many professions before the early 20th century. People who wanted to learn stuff usually got housing and a small stipend to apprentice. Now, of course, back in the day, because of the socioeconomic factors, race relations, how women were treated, the independent things, it was mostly white males who were in this position, absolutely. But those are independent of what it means to have an apprenticeship. And there are companies now that are emerging that are changing the tides of education. There are people like Khan Academy that are out there offering means for people to educate themselves and move up without having to spend all this crazy money. There are companies like Praxis, which now are offering people a small amount of money, a stipend, usually it's like $10 an hour, to go work with a company to do a formal internship and have an educational experience as well. There's a mentorship aspect. These mechanisms of change are what is needed to move away from this unpaid internship cycle. And it's not a matter of like everybody gets paid the same. It's just an opportunity gap that exists. And what happens, as I've talked about before, is that when you have all these barriers to entry for people, the monetary barrier, the barrier where people are going to college and spending all this money and coming out like, oh, I have no experience, but I just paid $50,000. You have all that crap, but nobody's actually taking the time to say, whoa, maybe that's what needs to be changed, is how you're learning and how you are being valued. And I think a lot of this you'll see is indoctrinated from people going to school. And I'm talking about elementary and secondary education. People are used to going to school, and it's insane. They're like, oh, I have to go to school for 8 hours or 7 hours, 8 hours today. I'm going to learn math and science and English and history, but they're not paid for it. And that's it. People don't realize that's work. They could be learning, but they could also be working. And people are very, knee-jerk again about this. Oh my gosh, children are going to work and there's not going to be education or anything like that. It's like, no, sorry, that's not how it works. With technological advances, the opportunity to have real-world experience while learning and getting paid for it emerges. The historical trends of like, oh, there's kids in factories and stuff like that was a matter of ethical evolution. That is a matter of intellectual growth, no more than learning, Newton's calculus and moving up through time. People can learn a better method of ethics and a better way of moving up with technology to allow for young people to be focused on education. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But to remove those barriers and to destroy the opportunity through the monopolization of accreditation, through the propagation of upholding these universities and these big colleges where you're paying tons of money and having no experience, and then putting the economic barriers together, which then say, oh my goodness, we can't really afford to have anybody, for even minimum wage. We have to do unpaid internships. You put all that stuff together, and you have a giant system that leads to failure and collapse. Ultimately, technology can save people, but that has to be on the table. It has to not be ignored, and it has to be something that people are not getting lost in that solution because of these red herrings. Like, oh, we need to just fix the top part, which is, make companies pay us this much money. No, you have to look at the base economic explanations, the beginnings of the regulations which have kept businesses from being able to afford to pay people, in the in-between stages. Because otherwise, all those government unpaid internships, yeah, they really seem to care about, helping people. I mean, with all the unpaid internships, with not-for-profits, volunteering, government positions, I mean, you could clearly see the hypocrisy just through and through, and that's just nature of government. All the hypocrisy that you can see, where it's it's not okay for you, but it's okay for us. You see the real long-term effects. So that is, all the rich kids can afford to have those unpaid internships to get the experience and work at mommy and daddy's company. Then all the people that are poor are just getting screwed because they lack the right information because of this trifecta of problems. The educational system as it's upheld, the levels of what minimum wage does as far as creating a gap, and then of course what happens with business regulations in terms of opportunity and not being able to afford to help you with the next generation. It's very simple. It's very simple stuff, very visible stuff because it's very microeconomics. But people just get lost in it because they're told all these mantras that we just need more and more laws and regulations, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, sorry. The more you have, the more time is spent understanding and interpreting those things, and paying people to not produce real wealth. Real wealth is the efficiency and surplus of the basic human needs: food, shelter, clothing, kind of, self-protection, water, those kinds of things. As technology moves up and makes those things abundant, the base human needs, everything else can grow. Same thing with any sort of technological advancement. You have to have the baby steps. And if you cut out the baby steps opportunity, well, guess what? You're going to have systematic failure. Hope that was helpful, and I'll talk to you later.